All right, cheers for coming on today, Dale. Yeah, so do you want to start off just by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. Glad we got it scheduled with the time difference. Um, yeah, well, I'll give you a bit of a short synopsis. I grew up in Central Victoria, which is the bottom southeast section of Australia. Grew up there. Um, One of three boys. Pretty normal upbringing. Um, and yeah, I was just pretty normal kid, and then got into education when I left uni. Didn't have much really. I wasn't really ambitious as far as a career or anything like that as a kid. Teaching kind of appealed to me because um, you get 12, 13 weeks holiday a year. So all I kind of really really wanted to do with my life was travel. Um, yeah, it took me a long time to grow up, and I think that's all I really wanted to do. But in the meantime, while I was doing that, I had a keen just interest in the occult, anything different, anything hidden, and I was pretty much like that from a very little child. Um, so yeah, I was kind of lived two lives where I would be, I was a pretty normal, like larrikin kind of kid, beers with the boys, playing football, all that kind of stuff, and then in between, I would go home and just study all this kind of stuff for hours. And the benefit of going to university was we used to have about 8 contact hours a week. So you're basically never at university. You're pretty much at home all the time. And it gave me a lot of time just to study. And I guess so when the whole COVID thing happened, I'd already made that decision a decade prior that because I knew they were going to vaccinate the world and that I would never do it. So when that came along, it wasn't a hard decision for me. And then what I found of them was all my mates that I've been trying to tell all this stuff to for years. Everyone started coming to me, like because people were quite confused. And I guess from there, it led me on a bit of a different path. So I started. It was a really frustrating period, particularly in Australia. We were under the heaviest. We were under the heaviest lockdowns, and so I was just outside of Melbourne, and Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. We couldn't even cross state borders. And where I'm from, Victoria, our state is separated by the Murray River. So to cross over, they had police checkpoints at all that. So we couldn't even leave our state borders. And it's a bit different in Australia from like the UK. So Australia's really, it's a bit like the United States. We're separated into different states, and the state jurisdiction really holds the power over the federal government. So yeah, we were in. It was a pretty difficult time, and then so I just had so much frustration, and what I'd learned about natural law over the years is my internet coming through okay. It's saying it's a bit unstable. Is that all right?
Yeah, your sound's coming through fine, but your video's a bit crackly, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, we got storms at the moment. Yeah, so uh, after like studying natural law, I I knew that it wasn't enough just to know this information, and that I hadn't really taken action. I'd basically just been accumulating knowledge over time, but I'd been sharing stuff online, but I thought, no, and this is a time I need to make some sort of impact here. And I had a lot of fear around that because I was still working as a teacher at the time. And, you don't really, so I put like an alias on YouTube, and it's kind of hope no one would ever see me. Like I just thought if I use my voice and put these videos out, at least I've got this off my chest, and I feel that I've contributed something. Because it's like, well, what could you do at that time? It was pretty hard to like gather people. So I thought that the least thing I could do is just use my voice. And there was a lot of information coming. A lot of people started speaking up then, but I could see it was real base level knowledge of what was coming out, and I'm like, no, I need to like add a bit more to this discussion. And then just through chance, like some people started watching my video, and then a couple of them blew up. And then I really went into panic mode because I'm like, oh, my employer's going to see these video, and eventually they did. um, yeah, and I mean, I could keep going from there, but yeah, basically, yeah, I end up getting terminated, and I've kind of just gone on, and from there, I ended up, I've managed to, interview and meet in person a lot of these people that I was researching for years. So it was quite amazing. I opened up this whole new world, and now I've got to the point where I'm running an online conference with me and a friend Madeline Doherty, and that's been going really good. But yeah, I'll leave it there if you got any questions. That's basically the gist of how it all kind of started.
What so from like an early sort of age, what attracted you into looking into the occult? Like what was the trigger point that because I know from like my own journey, I went down multiple rabbit holes of just watching YouTube videos and watching conspiracies out of excitement and out of oh my God, what if that is actually what happened? And then suddenly one day I was like, oh shit, all of that did actually happen.
It's
So
actually, well, how old are you guys?
I'm 27.
I'm 29.
27, 29. Yeah, yeah. What's yeah, I mean they're interesting ages too. Cause like I think YouTube came out about '05,
Yeah,
'05, '06.
around then.
Can you hear the kookaburra in the background?
Yeah.
There's this kookaburra that sings every morning at this time. Yeah, like honestly, for me, it was. I feel like I almost came in to this world like that because my very earliest memory is like mum bathing me in the sink, but my memory is looking down from my mum's eyes. Um, so, and then I had like other experiences as a kid where I would leave my body at will. So I had this kind of, yeah, I don't know. I had this kind. I knew that this world wasn't all what it appeared. And then I used to have these crazy contemplating thoughts where I couldn't sleep at night at like 4 or 5 years old, where I would, because I was told about heaven and that I would go to heaven when I died. So, I grew up in a Catholic family, and I would try and contemplate this infinity of staying in this one place, and it would just do my head in. But I mean, 9/11 was the big one. So I was 16 years old when 9/11 happened. I was working at McDonald's part time as a kid, and it was probably about a year after it happened, sort of in 2002, because there was no YouTube or anything back then. And I had a friend, because people used to do the DVD rounds back then. Like if there was a good DVD, you would kind of like share it around. It was like there's the same with like old like people used to have like pornos on the VHSs, and they would like that. That's how it used, because they got all this free internet stuff now. But like back then, you had to
Yeah.
like these secret little clubs. And, yeah, but so yeah, there was a DVD that went around. It was called Loose Change. I don't know if you that. It was basically the first ever. It was the first ever 9/11 documentary, and like from what we know now about 9/11, it's pretty base level, but it was enough for me back then to go, oh, holy shit, like this is not what we thought. Um, yeah, and it basically went from there. And then I used to listen to Coast AM, which was this American radio channel. I think it used to have like 20 million listeners back in the day. It was one of the biggest radio stations in the US, and they had an online platform. So before YouTube, I would just listen to hours and hours of that, and that had every crazy thing you could think of. And I guess a lot of my early belief systems, they've all kind of shifted and changed from them. But that was like because I think when you first start to awake, you just want to consume everything because it's like this whole weird, wonderful world that you don't know. Yeah. So it was a slow progression because I know a lot of people, particularly in 2020, a lot of people have just exploded in consciousness and what they're, especially like the social media age where the information just gets shared around so quick. But it wasn't like that back then. So it was a real slow progression. So yeah.
Yeah, I think 2020 was massive for people waking up. There's a lot of I could tell there was a lot of people that already had it in the mind that there was something more going on, but never had any tie. I think the thing what with COVID and the lockdowns was no one before that, no one had any actual time. to sit and properly think and study like you was on about before. And then when COVID hit and everyone was locked down and it felt a bit uncomfortable, a lot of people had the time to look into a few other things outside of COVID that sort of, if you keep going down that path, it leads you to where we are today. And obviously, yeah, there's a great awakening that came from that.
It was a double-edged sword, wasn't it? Because they wanted everyone at home, and then everyone had all this bloody time on their hand, and no one knew what was going on. So everyone was looking in. It was just like it was overload then, wasn't it? It was crazy. Yeah.
So you said before COVID, you knew, I think like 10 years before COVID happened, that the world was going to get vaccinated. Where did you read that initially? Or where did you find that out?
I mean, yeah, I mean, you guys are from the UK, so I was, I read all David Icke's books for years, and I saw him a couple of times when he came out to Australia. And funny enough, I had a ticket to go see him in Melbourne in 2019, late 2019. He was meant to go to Melbourne, and it was a big blow up. It actually got on the mainstream media here. And what they've done every time, because I think he's banned from most of the European Union now, was Australia was the first to ban him. So I think he'd been to Australia about 10 times before. And there's a guy called Devere Abramovich who's he's the head of it's like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League in America. So they got one here, and he's basically this radical Zionist in Melbourne, and he just lobbies governments. And he said that, David Icke's a Holocaust denier and all this kind of bullshit, and they banned him, right? But they stated on the immigration form why he was denied a visa. Well, two of the reasons were his views on climate change and vaccines. So like they were clearly prepping. But yeah, I mean, if you'd read, I can't remember which book it was. It was about 3 books before the 2020. David Icke did a whole expose on Bill Gates. It's about 120 pages, and he goes through, the whole Gates Foundation, Garvey, the Rockefeller Foundation, all that, and it was very obvious that they were, that was part of the agenda to vaccinate the world. And I mean, and this goes into the whole transhumanism thing, and that, they really want to enter the human body. So I like I said, I'd made that decision before. I just said under no circumstance will I ever take a vaccine. And then on top of that, like my mother's been an anti-vaxxer since the 80s. So, because like me and my brothers, we had, minor vaccine injuries as children. And then through that, Mum ended up taking us to, it's quite a famous homeopath in Australia that does detoxification from vaccines. So yeah, I was very tuned into that side of the agenda. So it was frustrating having to try and tell friends and stuff, and about what was in this vaccine, and not to talk, yeah. So yeah, it wasn't a difficult one, yeah. But because Ike always says too, if you know the outcome, you can see the journey. So if you just know the end goal and where they're trying to take this, then if enough people push back, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, right. There was a guy that was talking to you the other day when we were discussing about basically like people pushing back, and then we started discussing, well, if their end goal is depopulation so they can control more people, if we do end up pushing back, it just causes civil war, which they wouldn't be unhappy with anyway, because we're taking each other out in that situation. So we're kind of in a position now where, what do we actually do? Because you can't really stand up and rebel against it, because you've seen what happened. Well, what's happening even right now with the left and the right, it's utter like chaos. So by standing up and rebelling, you're going to get people rebelling against you, and it's going to cause civil war.
Yeah, and that's why I think ultimately it's a numbers game, and it's all about public awareness and consciousness too, because I think it's percentage. Once a certain percentage have awoken to it, then it's it's different. I don't see civil war happening. I think that's always been on the cards in America, because America's always been the stain in this agenda, and for whatever reason they allowed this Bill of Rights and Constitution to be written, which is like you got the Magna Carta and all this kind of stuff, but so much of this has been centered around the US. And if you look at the US Constitution, and then if you look at natural law, it follows many of these natural law principles. And the founding fathers, yes, they were Freemasons and stuff too. And then you're like, well, why would they put this thing on paper that would actually protect the population? And with America too, that they very much, as bad as America is, they have good knowledge and understanding of their rights. And I don't think the Brits are like that, and Aussies aren't like that at all, right? Americans are. I mean, yeah, you're very much like us, but they're staunch on their rights. We know what it's like with their gun rights, and now the stuff that's coming up with, like all the online social media censorship too. That they're staunch on these. You do not take away our freedom of speech. So I think it's the agenda was to bring in this kind of Third World War and then a civil war within the United States that would dissolve the Constitution under a state of emergency, right? So, but yeah, you can only have a civil war if you've got two sides fighting against each other. If all the people are actually routed against, the proper enemy, there is no civil war. And I think with revelations that are coming out now and that will continue to come out, I think it's just going to galvanize the American population more together. You're always going to have this small percentage that's going to be fighting for the establishment, like these fucking blue-haired, autism, fucking LGBT, these absolutely crazy people. But like for the vast majority, and I know a lot of Americans, they're kind of more on one side. Not to say the Republicans are good, but they're definitely pushing for more of that side of, freedom of the people and the Constitution. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I know the UK and Australia, I don't know what they've done to us. We're like apathy-ridden countries, and like it's really the UK is the most similar to Australia culturally. We're probably even more apathetic here. I don't know what it is. It's I mean, yeah, I've got a lot of suggestions, but where do you think the state of the people is now in the UK? Is it just kind of like business as usual now? It's kind of just gone back to normal, except for the price of everything's gone through the roof. And
yeah, I think that's still a lot of people are still annoyed because of the price of things going up so drastically. There's definitely that sense of, because you can, even when you go out, like I go out like around town or something on a night out, there's no one out. There's like 0 people really out.
That's happened here too.
Yeah, before COVID, you would go out maybe 5 days of the week. It'll be quite busy. Here now, it's just not busy on at any point.
Well, do you know a part of like this agenda too was that, and they've done it in Australia, was because the Brits are known for their, you love having a drink and going out in the local pub. That's very much part of the culture, and that's been part of Australian culture for a long time. But the last 10 years, they've done everything they can to destroy pub culture, and it's not because they don't want the alcohol flowing. It's because the local pub used to be where you got your job. That was the that was the community and your networking, and all our sporting clubs over here. Like if you play a local sport, everyone's sponsored by a local pub, so everyone comes back and has a meal at the pub. But they've killed it here, even with like live music venues. They put all these taxes on the venue for if they play live music now, and they've just made it unaffordable for a lot of these businesses to keep running. And the young kids, like, you can't go out. Like we used to go out, we call it a pineapple in Australia, like a $50 note. That was a night out. That was your beers, your taxi home and a pizza, and now it's a $300 night. Kids can't afford that. So it's part of separate.
Is beer and alcohol cheap in your supermarkets?
Oh no, it's not cheap anywhere. We've got like the highest tax rates on alcohol and cigarettes in the world. Yeah, it's out of control. Right.
Because it's expensive if you go to a bar here, but if you want to go to the supermarket, it's really cheap. So it got me thinking, are they just trying to get people just drinking at home on their own?
At home, yeah. What do you pay for like a beer at a supermarket?
You can get, how much would you say?
Five pint cans for a fiver for £5.
Yeah, whereas
Yeah,
in the pub it costs a fiver for 1 pint or £6 for 1 pint.
yeah, right. So yeah, we'd pay $25-30 for a 6 pack of beer at a
Wow.
shop. So that'd be £15. Yeah,
That's expensive.
15,
Wow.
16 Yeah, ridiculous. But yeah, like, I used to live in the Czech Republic, and yeah, it's a like that they don't tax beer there. So if it's a Czech beer, there's no tax. And fuck, we used to buy like the 2 liter Brannocks or Kozels, and they were like, I think they're like £1, £1.50. It's
Well, the
crazy.
other problem in the UK is the housing prices. I think that's the main thing. What's pissing everyone off is you've got all these young people getting to an age where they want to go out and buy a house, but it's impossible because all of the houses were bought in the 70s and 80s, but very, very cheap. And these people that have hold of the houses now, they don't want to let go of them because they're probably thinking, say if you're a 50-year-old with a house that you bought for, I don't know, 20 grand, they're probably thinking it's worth like 200k now. They're probably thinking I'll just hold on to it for another 10 years until I retire and then sell it. That's what they're all thinking because then it'll go up to 300, 400k. But then they're building all of these new builds, these like new housing estates. But if you look at the state of the houses that they're building, they're all falling like down like within a few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like isn't it weird that like the entire Western world is all having a housing crisis at the same time, right? Like, is that a coincidence? Where's this come from? So, I mean, it's come out in America that BlackRock and all these other big investment firms have been going around buying up all these properties, and they've basically artificially created this mass shortage of homes, and then you chuck Airbnb on the market, right, too. So there were statistics come out of Sydney the other day, like Sydney house prices. They would be as bad as London, if not worse. It's probably the worst in the world. And they've said now that young people will never and cannot afford a home in Sydney. But now they can't even afford rentals. So most people are like living with their parents to high ages, or now they're starting to get out of the city. And what's happening in Australia, and there's been like they're artificially shifting a lot of these people around different parts of the country. So the kind of white Aussie or old Aussies are moving to smaller country towns and to the coast, and at the same time, we're bringing in our highest immigration ever, immigration percentage since like World War II into Australia. So we got no houses, and they're flooding in. We've actually got the highest immigration per capita in the world in Australia over the next 2 years. So they're flooding all these migrants in from Asia into the cities. It's just absolutely bizarre, but it's complete reshuffling. And there's people, people living in their cars and stuff. And then over in Australia now, too, we've had bushfires and floods for the last 3 years. There's a lot of people that it's 2 years to get your house rebuilt after these floods. There's not enough labourers. Insurance companies aren't paying out, and then if you want to rebuild, they won't insure you. They won't insure your house. We've had like small businesses that are, if you pay the insurance, you're never going to make any money because you're in a flood zone now. So this is the whole smart city resettling that they're kind of trying to bring in. But you can see both energies working through, because as much as they want people in the cities, there's a real drawing of certain people leaving the cities as well.
What do you think the purpose of increasing the amount of migrants coming into the country is for? Because it's not just a problem in Australia; it's a problem here in America. It's a problem in all Western. Like what we're saying about the UK and Australia is happening everywhere, and it just seems so bizarre that we're all suffering from exactly the same issues.
Well, it's the Western world, isn't it? And it's particularly the Five Eyes countries, so Australia, New Zealand, UK, America, and Canada. So, I mean, he's aware of the Kalergi plan. You heard about the Kalergi plan?
No.
So what are you both? So you're both ethnic background. What are you guys?
We're brothers, first of all.
Are you brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where are you? You born in England?
Yeah, we're both born in England. Our mother is white English and our dad's Indian.
Oh, it's Indian background.
Yeah, half Indian, half English.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I mean, with the Kalugi plan, basically what they so if you go back to a guy called Maurice Strong, who was yeah, you know him, like helped set up the European Union, and they spoke about the post-democratic, post-industrialized West. So what they're trying to do with the Kalugi plan, this was what they wanted to do was they wanted to flood the Western world with migrants to homogenize these countries. And you would have seen it in the UK now, where you strip down national identity. So there is no national identity. Like, what is it to be British when, you know, because like I'm all for immigration. Immigration is good, but it needs to be a controlled immigration. You don't just, and that's with any country in the world. If you bombard a certain percentage of migrants, then you lose the culture. Um, and in Australia, we had a white Australia policy until the 70s. So Australia was basically just a European. Because the Greeks and the Italians and even the Dutch and the Germans and stuff were coming over after World War II, but it's mostly always been British immigrants that have come over. And then they opened it up in the 70s to the Southeast Asians, and now it's mostly African and Arab migrants that come over to Australia now, and um, there's such a different so different culturally when you're taking in people from Syria and Iran and these kind of countries and South Sudan is where we get a lot of our migrants now, and then you place them in this this white ochre Aussie kind of like it's just and it does I've seen like in Australia like especially the Vietnamese and stuff that came over in the 70s, they're very much assimilated into Australian culture, but it was done more slowly, right? And then they adapt to the culture. But with the flooding of it, it's basically because they want this one world government. So if you strip down what it is, any part of what it is to be Australian, like what is Australian? A big part of your country is your culture, your race, and your language. So when those things are kind of torn down, then there's no point fighting for any form of nationalism. Um, if there is no national, like I don't, what's the stats now in London with um, isn't it like more people in London now are not British? Is that right? Then
I think I have heard that stat. I'm not sure the actual figures on it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
and I mean, like they done a number on you guys because they just kept adding more and more countries to the European Union as it went on, and then once you're starting to get to like Poland and these sort of places where you can't blame them if they want to go over to England, make money, send it home. But that was the whole plan, and they don't call it each individual countries anymore. It's the EU. It is one. They are a nation. There's no borders. You're just like little separates, like pretending to be countries now. And I think that's what Brexit was actually was a good pushback and showed where a lot of people were at. But yeah, as far as the other part of it too, and what I think they're going to do is, ISIS went away for 4 years during COVID. There was no such, and we know ISIS is basically just Western intelligence. And all of a sudden they're back, right? They've just come back, old ISIS. So I do think that what they're actually setting up is they're going to do more staged Muslim terrorist kind of things within the Western countries, and then they're going to blame Iran for funding these people, and especially what you've seen within the US border, that they're crossing over, like en masse, and they're not all coming from Mexico. They're coming from the Middle East and all these other places. So they're going to show that a lot of the funding is coming out of Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood and Qatar and all these kind of things, right? And ultimately to try and set up a conflict with the West and the Muslim world. That
So do you
you
think
know,
that's why the media's pushing this Israel-Palestine conflict so hard to sort of set up what conflict's going to come into the West?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Well, that's like the letter from like Mazzini to Albert Pike and all that.
That's in that.
Oh, so that was it was written in the 1800s, and he basically laid out the three world wars.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's in the Museum of London, I think. The letter.
Or is it?
Yeah, but the last one is he talks about the unleashing of the nihilists. So which you could kind of put into this ISIS group, or someone that just with no morals and no beliefs, and to place the Muslim world against political Zionism. And you can see now the world has turned on Israel, and everyone's like, it's kind of great that Israel's finally been exposed, but it very much looks like they're doing everything they can to expose Israel, right? Um, and like Israel's not really doing anything more than they've done for the last 70 years. They're just kind of doing it a bit more on a grander scale, and it's like quite clear that they're it's ethnic cleansing going on before our eyes, and people just like, yeah. So I mean, ultimately, that's what they want. This goal of, yeah, they want a destruction of Israel too. Although it looks like the Zionists are in control, they want this destruction of Israel with this final conflict, right? That draws in the rest of the world.
What part do you think China plays in this global plan?
Well, I very much believe in like repeating time patterns. So like I mean that's a whole other topic. You can go into like simulation theory and all these kind of things, but time repeats, and it repeats synchronistically in very specific time cycles. And if you look at the last Pluto and Aquarius cycle, this happened in the 1770s. So that was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and we're just going into Pluto and Aquarius now. So it's all repeating again. But during that period, China actually took on an isolationist point of view, and they actually stopped. China actually played a part in the American Revolution because they stopped selling tea over to the West, and when that happened, that led to the tea tax and stuff in America, which led to the American Revolution. So I think if we're looking at repeating time cycles, that China's basically going to stay more isolationist. As much as it looks in the media that they keep putting out these videos where they're doing the freaking goose march, like, and they look like scary as fuck. And you're like, our military is like not gonna like, and we're sitting on the border of China here, like they're just to the north of us. And we're like, we've got the shittest military in the world, like absolutely, we got nothing. Our military is basically chuck a few US bases in the Pacific and they'll protect us. But yeah, like I don't see a global conflict to what they've got planned. I think it's mostly smoke and mirrors. Um, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, if the time cycle repeats, I see them being more isolationist, but the media will prep it up. Obviously that was part that they're showing in America too how much of the federal government has been infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party too. So does China really need to go around and invade all these countries in the world? They've already done it. They've done it for the last 50 years. Like they own the Australian ports, they own the Australian farmland. Um, they've got control over the universities in Australia. It's the same in America. Like, why do they need to invade us? They've already taken over. They've done it through stealth.
Yeah. So do you reckon they won't invade Taiwan?
Look, they probably will. They probably will just to to provoke America. But then you got to get to the point that like the Chinese and the Americans and the English and that at the highest level they're not separate countries when you're talking about the secret dark occult and stuff that actually runs these countries. They're all working together while there is people operationally that run these countries that believe they're working for their own country. It's ultimately, it's all one fucking shit show. It's all one circus, right?
Yeah. What are your thoughts around artificial intelligence?
Oh, how long you got? I mean, yeah, I've been talking a lot about this. It's to me that the ultimate goal is transhumanism. That there's incessant desire to get technology inside the human body, and this is what the whole transgender movement has been about. Transgenderism is not, it's got nothing to do with it. Transgenderism is a stepping stone to transhumanism. And just like artificially inducing a disease called autism was also a stepping stone to transhumanism. And if you looked at the rise of transgenderism too, it actually perfectly coincides with this huge spike in transgenderism from the initiation of TikTok. So when TikTok come in 2020, it's exploded. And if you look at how an autistic brain works and how the frontal lobe is diminished, and particularly through the use of technology, how it starts to push you back into the reptilian brain and outside of the mammalian brain. And then you introduce things like TikTok that also attacks the frontal lobe, and you install programming into it. You know that at the end of TikTok, it does that little doo-doo, doo-doo. That's like it's like a pokey machine, right? So that's like the dopamine hit that keeps you getting to watch more. But ultimately, I mean, I've done presentations on this where I think artificial intelligence is like human beings have not created artificial intelligence. This is a part within the universe that is always there. It's actually a part of creator that is separated from creator. And what it's doing is it's mimicking creation. So, I mean, it goes all the way into, if you look at what the universe is, and if the universe is a hologram, right? So this was like a lot of the early stuff that I was looking at years ago with David Talbot and David Icke and all the rest of it. And you know, it's pretty undeniable when you look at the science that we're living in a hologram. You know, if you're looking at quantum physics and stuff like that. But what a hologram is every part is a smaller version of the whole. So it contains all the information within it. So like both you guys, you are your own compressed hologram. You're your own fractal of the hologram, right? Of the whole. And what artificial intelligence is doing is it's actually trying to mimic the compression of the universe. It's trying to create its own version of a hologram. And we've seen, like, have you seen the Sentient World Simulation? This was like it was a DARPA-funded Department of Defense. They basically created a online universe and an online Earth where every single person has their own node within it. So each one of you guys, everything you do on your phone, everything you say that's recorded, your daily habits, all your shopping, all this kind of stuff is recorded and sent into this program. And so they've got everyone's data on the whole planet. And this is only one replication that they've done. But then they would have like all these different nodes and clusters of nodes. And the whole point of it was they would use it in the Afghanistan and Iraq war, that if they would know every single action that they would take, they could then calculate it through the computer what the reactions would be based on all the data that they've fed every single person and the clusters of nodes. So they're already showing you here that even within the public sphere, that they're able to replicate through technology the Earth itself. You know, and that's only what's within the public sphere. So it's like how big is artificial intelligence? Like what actually is artificial intelligence? It goes really, really bizarre. And I actually think that what's happening is like there's an awakening taking place, because you've got to look at everything through as duality. If there's an awakening taking place, there's also an artificial awakening taking place. So there's a synthetic version of everything. And I mean, you only need to look in Mandela effect and all this kind of stuff, that there looks like there's some rippling of reality here. There's some kind of force of like different realities trying to fight it out for what is the base reality. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it depends where you want to go with that. But
so talking about, just going off AI, talking about the Mandela effect, do you think what was happening at CERN has any effect on?
It's hard. I mean, look, it's hard to know. I'm sure they're trying to do things through CERN. Yeah, I mean, like, when did the Mandela effect really blew up? Like 2012, 2013. I know it had been around for decades, but like it really kind of exploded then. So, and I think it basically goes into, you know, there's these theories that if you if you change the present, you can change the past. But have you heard of like bleed through with the Mandela effect, where there's you know what bleed through is? So there's so with certain Mandela effects, and how you know they are a Mandela effect, because you'll be like, oh fuck, I remember that. That wasn't the same, right? And these can just be individual things in your life. And you start, you know, because a Mandela effect is where the collective actually remembers something different. But sometimes I think it happens individually where you're like, no, that person didn't say that. No, I remember. But so with bleed through, so example I always use is you boys might be a bit young to remember De La Soul. I don't know if you know De La Soul. American rap band. But anyway, you know, like the Snow White Mirror Mirror on the Wall. So everyone remembers Mirror Mirror on the Wall. And it doesn't say that now. Now it says mirror. What does it say now? Magic mirror on the wall. Right? So it's changed to that. No one remembers that. No one. So what bleed through is to prove that, you know, there was a base thing, that it was Mirror Mirror on the Wall. So there's a De La Soul song, and the song's called, you know, it goes Mirror Mirror on the Wall, and there's all these other different references in like books, videos of other people that have referenced this Mirror Mirror on the Wall, that shows there is a collective awareness that this thing used to be something else. So that's what bleed through is. And then you know, looking at a lot of the Tartarian stuff, and people trying to understand like what was this previous civilization that may have been around, right? What are these old buildings? How did they build them? They didn't build them with horse and cart. They couldn't have done it in medieval times. And everyone's trying to look for what is the technology that may have built these things. And for me, I look at it as different frequencies, and that these old buildings are just bleed through. Or it's a possibility that these are just bleed through, right, of a previous civilization that we remember. Anyway, you got to listen to De La Soul.
Yeah.
What's that? What do they call that British rap? What's that like British rap?
Right.
It's very have you ever heard Aussie hip hop?
I don't think I have actually.
No.
Oh, I'll have to send you some. It's like, yeah, Aussie hip, it's quite unique actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk to you when I reached out to you about ritual abuse survivors.
All right, that's yeah, you did, yeah.
What is that exactly?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, where do I start with that? So look, if you look back, you study the ancient world, even looking at the Bible and stuff, and you know these old Babylonian cults, that it's, you know, they practice child sacrifice, human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and the more I'm looking, like when I was talking about AI and that before too, that it very much appears a technology, because within the ritual, they're very set on ritualistic dates, practices. Everything needs to be perfect, right? It's really strict, rigid protocol. So I've got to know a number of different ritual abuse survivors over the last few years. But I mean, this was key to a lot of the stuff that I was learning years ago when I read Kathy O'Brien's book, and she was called a presidential model under the MK Ultra program. Now she's not so much into the ritual stuff, but she was used as a high level sex slave for, you know, people like Bill Clinton, George Bush, and many others. But once I started going down that path, yeah, I mean, it's so well documented. Everything from like the Dutroux case. There's so many different survivors, and out here, and then obviously with the Jimmy Savile stuff, you know, it was getting printed on this, you know, the front page of the Sun for a while, that he was saying Ava Satanas and having satanic rituals at the mortuary in the hospital. So, you know, it's very much pedophilia, Satanism, and child abuse all go hand in hand. And the question is why? Like, why do they do it, right? And ultimately, what I've started getting more into lately is there's a ritual abuse survivor that I've done a lot of videos with, and she's a good friend now. and she's been doing a lot of study on the ley lines, and she's been teaching me and a lot of other people how to actually spot these ley lines in, like when you go out in the bush. And I've only just been able to start spotting them now, and it's amazing. Like when you go out and you can actually see these ley lines that feed into these portals. And what they do is the Satanists have positioned a lot of famous churches, monuments, everything from the UN building in New York that was a former slaughterhouse. And what they do is they practice lots of child sacrifice and all the rest of it within the rituals on these portals. And what it does is, like, the human body is that we have meridians everywhere, that the earth, because the earth is like, we're a fractal of the earth. We are so the earth has its own meridians, these ley lines. And when you're constantly performing these rituals, that this energy is actually keeping part of this synthetic vibration and the control of consciousness on this planet, and that they need to continually do it. So we're in what's the date today? 4th of April. So we're in the season of sacrifice now. So this is the worst part of the whole satanic calendar, from the equinox March 21st, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, until May the 1st. So this is where, they perform these rituals out in the public, anything from, like we've seen recently, the Baltimore Bridge, the ISIS shootings, and, a lot of them will fall in this March, April timeline. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, what is it? They're conjuring up these entities within the ritual. And if you look at what a pedophile is, they're a conduit for these demonics, right? That are going in. And it's interesting now that even with the LGBT movement, the flag that they wave, the transgender flag, or not the transgender, but the LGBT flag, is an inverted chakra. And what this lady Rachel Vaughan told me, that she was part of a ritual as a child, and where they inserted a knife up her backside, and that this is a very purposeful ritual. That the reason they do this is to actually flip the energetic body of the child, and it can actually make you extremely psychic. So, there's a lot of purpose for the madness of these rituals. I mean, I've done another interview with a lady, Max Lowen, who's a friend as well too, and she speaks a lot about, it's used for so many different reasons, but it's and we're seeing now, even with like the P Diddy sort of stuff in there, there's no suggestion of satanic ritual, but like there's a huge part of it that's compromised as well. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Australia there was a massive pedophile ring that has been, it's been widely exposed in the alternative media, that was operating in Sydney, and they basically had to run an entire police corruption inquiry because it got so out of hand, the police corruption, and because this involved a lot of police and mostly the judiciary in Australia. So there was a former senator that actually got a hold of police documents, and he read them out within the Senate, and he listed 28 VIP pedophiles that it's been suggested most are in the legal system, and one was a former prime minister, and this prime minister's been named by a lot of other survivors too. So basically, and these are put on 100-year suppression orders, so these names can never be made public, investigate, or anything, but that a politician has the right under parliamentary privilege to bring up the fact that these documents exist. So this caused a huge explosion in the awareness of high level child abuse in Australia. Like I don't know if a lot of people know about that around the world, but I mean, you had the Westminster pedophile ring. There's how that didn't rip apart the British establishment. It's insane that where that was going, and then it just got thwarted. So yeah, I mean, yeah, why do they do it? It's part of this unseen demonic realm trying to influence the physical world, right? And ultimately, that's what's running the show. So, and this also ties into, people go like, oh, how are we going to bring this system down? We need to round these people up and kill them, right? Well, it's not the case because they, you know, these demonic entities, they operate through humans. So if we just take out all these people, have we got rid of that energy? Does that energy just keep inhabiting more bodies? Right? So ultimately, yeah, what we need is what I think it is humans need to lose we all live in a collective victim mentality that we still see ourselves as victims, and everything from paying taxes to everything, all the shit that we put up with. That once we kind of lose, if we really want to get rid of that energy, that we have to lose this victim mentality. And if there's no victim mentality, there can't be an oppressor because they're matching energies. You can't have a victim without an oppressor. So the oppressor is there because we are the victim.
Right. So all of this, what's happening is there to keep the energies flowing.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
So just speaking about rituals, there was this thing I heard about in Israel. There's like a red heifer which they need to sacrifice. I don't know. Have you heard of it?
Is this the cows?
Yeah, it's a cow. So basically there's these red heifers, obviously, but there's a very specific one that's like, I think it's one in every 1,000 of them are this certain way. I mean, like a certain print on it or something. And I guess the Israelis sacrifice them when they find these every one in 1,000, and apparently they just found one, and it's due. It's just because you were talking earlier about the time of year, because we're in April and it's that time of year. They're saying they're planning to sacrifice this red heifer, something like, is it called layover? I don't know when layover is though. They need to sacrifice it either after layover or just before it or somewhere near that time. And that
Passover.
Passover, sorry, yeah, not layover. And that's
Yeah,
going to open.
I don't, look, I know. As far as yeah, like, you want to talk about like ritual dates, like why they do it?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, if you break the year into, like we live in a cycle, even within the solar calendar, right? So we, so that if you break the year up into the four parts of the solstice and the equinox, and then you split it into 8 parts, which is the halfway point between the equinox and the solstices. That's where you get the 40-day period, and that ties into the 40 days fasting, the Jesus story, all that kind of thing. And they're actually called Sabbaths, those dates. So, October 31st, Halloween that's a Sabbath date. September 21st, May the 1st, June 21st. And, how obsessive these people are with ritual to the point where, Prince William was born on the eclipse and the summer solstice. So to be born on the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere you are the sun king. This is their ultimate ritual, and he was induced to be born on the 21st because of supposedly Charles' polo playing schedule. That's why he was born on that date. And everything from him being, he's the thousandth knight of the round table. He's the one. And even the name William is Will. I am, because I am is the creator. So he's trying to invert creator. And I think this tying into Israel, what the plan is with Israel is they eventually want to create unity. So what I see is the satanic force is seeing that there is a natural awakening and unity coming together of the people, and organic coming together. So what they try and do, because they know they can't stop this cycle from happening, because we're coming to the end of the age of Pisces and also the end of the precession of the equinox. So this is a huge grand cycle, and ultimately they know that the energy is shifting, and this is part of duality where it goes dark to light. This is the vibration of the universe, how it works. It must go from a dark period to a light period. So instead of trying to push away, or trying to force away from this natural swing that it's coming back to the light, they'll try and override that with a version of light. And this is what they're going to do. They want to create mass chaos to then bring unity, like to bring their form of unity. And I think that that's part of the ritual with William, and that the British still have title over the Holy Land. They never relinquished that. It was basically loaned to the Zionists was given to them by the crown, and we're seeing now too that there's a clear destruction of the crown taking place too, right? The royal family hasn't the royal family hasn't got much left, and the Catholic Church hasn't got much left too, because I think ultimately they want to install a new religion as well too, because Catholicism is basically dying, but there is a new revival of Christianity taking place too. Uh, but yeah, I mean, with the reason that they do, most of the sacrifices in the 40-day period now till May the 1st that was the time of preparing the harvest in the northern hemisphere, and this goes back to the old pagan gods, that you had to draw blood from people to give homage to the gods, that you would get a good harvest, right? This is where that kind of all dates back from. But you look at all the big events throughout history. Go check from March 21st to. You remember when London was having those terrorist attacks like all the time, and like the Manchester bombing and all those oh, you'd remember the Manchester bombing if you're up that way. Remember that? Was that the area? I mean, that was what do you think of that one? Because I mean I looked at that because they used to do a lot of these, like the original like tube bombing and stuff like that. That was horrific, and all these people died. And then they went to this Manchester, like ones like the Manchester one, and the one where the MP was giving CPR to the guy on the in Westminster. Remember that? There's some guy got stabbed, and then all the
the London Bridge stabbings, were they?
yeah. They had all the ambulance and paramedics were standing around. And it was the MPs like saving that. They're like, does not happen. And there's always a shoe. Every time they do a bombing, they'd position a shoe next to the person as well. They do that as a mind controlled trigger to position it.
You watch when they next to.
Yeah, they'll position a shoe in the picture always, and it's kind of a way. So the reason they do that is it's actually tied into the trauma of us because of the Holocaust, because the symbol of the Holocaust is shoe, and Holocaust in Hebrew actually is shua, comes from the word shua. So what you associate when they'll show you a stabbing, and then they zoom in on the shoe, and then it'll go to the reporter, and then the reporter will say, this was a Muslim terrorist attack, blah, blah, blah. And then you're induced, because of the programming of the subliminal of the shoe, you will then take in, yeah. It's basically like, like Pavlov's dog, like classical conditioning, where you introduce a bell, and then after it, you don't even need to do something traumatic. You just show the shoe, and the shoe will trigger the response. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, look out for it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to look through all the other ones as well now.
How much do you know about the Nazis and their obsession with the occult?
I mean, a little bit, not a great. It's actually interesting. The lady I brought up before, so she was used in ritual abuse, and her father was so Rachel Vaughan's her name if you want to check her out. She's amazing, and her father was basically intelligence asset and also a procurer of children and all this sort of stuff. But she's done research into people's eyes, and she's pointed out this thing called heterochromia or heterocentrochromia, and these are it's a rare eye type that basically means you have two colors within the eye. And some people actually have two different colored eyes. But I think one of the highest percentage of people that had this eye pigmentation were the gypsies, right? That were famously taken into camps in Nazi Germany. And basically, if you've got this eye disfiguration or whatever you call it, that you actually have a different access of light. So you can actually see, I can't remember, I think it's more into the infrared or the ultraviolet. I think it's in the infrared. And this is where, like, if people see ghosts or entities and stuff, you'll usually see them at the corner of the eye. If you turn, you won't see them. And it's got part to do with this eye pigmentation, which is actually the DNA. So they did studies on the gypsies, and it was basically because they found out that these people have greater access to the psychic realm. And if you go back to like people like Kathy O'Brien and a lot of people that went through these MK Ultra programs, that they were actually trying to find kids that had this psychic ability. that they could use for multiple reasons. But yeah, I mean, it goes into all that like stuff with Joseph Mengele was taken over to America and eventually Argentina, where they were calling him Dr. Green, and he basically brought the MK Ultra program over to the West. And then I guess obviously England's famously known for Tavistock Institute, which created the Beatles. But that, I mean, they all came out of Nazi programs.
The stuff that you've talked about today with MK Ultra and some of the other things that we've touched on, have you watched Stranger Things?
Nah, never seen it.
You've heard of Stranger Things, all right? The TV
Yeah.
show.
Never seen it though. Yeah.
It's basically sounds like all this MK Ultra stuff because that's what they do. They get these kids and who have got these superpowers. Obviously, it's a bit exaggerated because it's a TV show, and it gives them like the ability to go into the underworld, the dark world.
Yeah.
But I watched Stranger Things obviously whenever it came out, way before I had this sort of awakening or was introduced to all of this sort of information. But like as I'm going on this journey and speaking to people like yourself, I just keep thinking every time we talk about it, I keep thinking of Strange Things like that is just a replication of what the MK Ultra was.
I mean, yeah. I mean, how much stuff do they put in movies now? I kind of look at movies like ancient texts now. You gain so you gain so much out. I watched one. I actually watched one last night. The Purge. Have you seen The Purge? The
Yeah, the one
election.
about no laws for 24
Yeah,
hours.
yeah. It's so fucked up because I hate horror movies. It's not my thing. Like I'm not into that horror and stuff. But I saw someone do a bit of a decode on the last Purge the election. It's called, and I thought, oh, I better watch better watch it. But yeah, I mean, there's so much in movies, isn't there? But I mean, the CIA's got their own section that does Hollywood script writing and funding, and Department of Defense. That they funded movies like Black Hawk Down, and all these kind of military movies, and even things like Iron Man. Iron Man is funded by the Department of Defense. Like why?
Yeah, because all these military movies, they were quite a big hit like in the 2000s.
Yeah. Well, that's what. They were still pushing the patriotism then too, but now it's kind of the opposite. Because they needed to use patriotism to push those Middle Eastern wars, but once that was done, they've switched the West to this real globalism and a hating of your own country too, right? So it was interesting to watch that take place because I mean, especially Americans, they're patriotic to the point where it's embarrassing, where they actually think they're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and they put their. I remember I was at a basketball game in America, and the national anthem come on, and like in Australia, like yeah, I probably wouldn't even stand up. You certainly wouldn't put your hand on your heart, like absolutely not. Like, if they play the national anthem here at a sporting game, not many people would sing it. It's just, I don't know. It's just the way Australians are. But like in America, some guy yelled at me to take my hat off. He's like, "Get your hat off." I'm like, "Oh fuck." But it's a good thing. But it's weird that they were still hard pushing that in the early 2000s with the Iraq War, and that it was patriotism that most Americans signed up. But then they flipped it because it was only required for a certain amount of time, and it's not part of the agenda anymore. I don't
Yeah,
want
it's funny how the entertainment reflects that. There's that other one movie that Barack Obama like
Oh yeah, yeah, I
created.
saw that. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one.
yeah.
Just
Did you watch that?
yeah. Well, I watched it after. Well, Aaron mentioned it and then mentioned the film to me, and then he was like, "Yeah, yeah, Barack Obama made it," and I was like, "What? I have to watch it if Barack Obama's making films."
Yeah. But look, I think it highlights the importance of these movies, and what it is because it shows the creative ability of the human being, and they know that because they can see into these time cycles and what they want to happen, and to amplify that, they have to put that into the public awareness that we create it, right? Yeah. So there is purpose behind it, and that whole thing is really they kind of don't really say, but they kind of say that like America's been invaded kind of thing, right? And it's like a cyber, which is, you know, they're clearly pushing for that, and they've done a number of little beta tests here in Australia. Like we had one a couple of months ago where my phone provider, the telecommunication network, went out for 12 hours. So like we couldn't contact anyone. It was kind of like a nice little test. And we're like, we're in serious shit. Like if this goes out for a couple of weeks, which I think they'll do. But yeah.
Yeah, 12 hours would have been a bit mental.
Well, I was in the car. I had to do a 12-hour drive that day. So I just sat. I was like, this is the worst. Have you ever like had to listen to the radio all day? Like, and I just had on the news, and they repeat the news every 20 minutes. Like they do a little snapshot, and you're like, oh my fucking God, if I have to listen, there's nothing.
I don't think I've even listened to like 20 minutes worth of news in the last, I don't even know how many years.
Do you guys watch what's the mainstream media like now over there? You got Sky
BBC.
and BBC.
Yeah,
To be
BBC.
fair, a lot of what comes up on my YouTube is Sky News Australia for some reason.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, I don't know why that keeps coming up on my YouTube. I
Yeah,
never ever watch mainstream media on my YouTube ever, but Sky News Australia always comes up.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
Yeah.
I watched that guy from Rebel News. I don't know if that might trigger something.
That's probably right.
Avi, yeah.
Avi Yemeni. Yeah, well, do you guys do you keep abreast at all of what's happening in Australia? Like, do you follow much what's happening over here?
I remember watching Avi during the pandemic, and he was going to, I think he was just going to see like the protests and stuff, and the police were just like, beating people up and beating him up. So I was watching those, but not much in Australia.
I feel like we really have to go out of our way to get Australian, like to figure out what's going on in Australia here. Like the mainstream doesn't cover anything Australian.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, ours is like, yeah, our mainstream news is when you're talking other countries, it's I think it's the same everywhere. There's always a big focus on American politics, Trump, but I think that's everywhere. And then a little bit in the UK too. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty much.
politics are a bit weird as well. Definitely at the moment with Rishi Sunak in power.
Yeah, it's yeah, what's going to happen? Do you know what's weird in Australia though too? Because you know there clearly is a rise in, you know, anti-establishment and popularism, which has kind of morphed itself into the conservative side of politics. They've become, not that I would ever vote, but you know, the conservative side is more, you know, the more freedom orientated people have pushed that way. But in Australia, we have ultra left wing governments in federal government and every single state government in Australia. They're full. So the whole world's kind of is pushing towards the right, and ours is towards the left. But look, being on the ground and speaking to people, they are rigging these Australian elections to. There's no doubt they're 100% rigged. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, even with our local council, because you know, they talk about mail-in balloting and stuff like that, and how risky it is. Well, that all our local councils they're all done by mail-in balloting. And like, do you have the preferential voting system in the UK? I don't.
What's that?
So basically, in Australia, if you go to vote, you have to mark 1 down to 6 or 7, whoever the candidates are, right?
No. We just vote. We just mark one person or one.
Okay, so that's a better system. So like our system it's so corrupt, and it's designed.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Mate, no one even knows how it works here. No one knows. And what they do is you'll vote. Oh, you're like, I like him 1, and then you'll go. You like the next one 2. But if you what happens is if your number 1 doesn't get any amount of the vote, the 1 gets thrown out. Then it goes to your number 2, and then that gets thrown out, and then it goes all the way. And then what happens is the person you voted 5th will end up getting, that gets your vote. That's who you voted for on the preferential system, because all these parties have done deals with, if you put that there, that goes. it's really, really hard to explain, but it's so
I get
corrupt.
it. That's the weirdest setup ever.
Yeah, so dodgy.
Yeah. And the average person has no idea how this works. I mean, I don't even know how it works. And yeah, but what was I going to say? Yeah, what they do is like some of these parties they'll bring out a party and they'll call it like Freedom Party or whatever, and everyone's like, oh fuck, that's a good party. And it's actually been created by one of the major parties, and then you don't know their preferential system, so you put the Freedom Party one, and then that goes to the Labor Party. Do you know what I mean? But you won't know that. They do little dodgy tricks like this all the time because if you're on the ground and you speak to any person like, what do you think of the Labor Party? It'd be like 95% they are fucking scumbags. I would never vote for them.
Right.
But they're
it
in
somehow funnels down to them being in power.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of like the inner city part. It's much like London. Like, so Australia's the same. It's, inner city Melbourne, inner city Sydney, they're your ultra left wing voters. And then the further you get out into the countryside, and it's like your Brexit too. They very much, there's a real divide between those who live in the inner city and the rest of the country. And they're the ones that push the green agenda the most, and that they don't go anywhere near the countryside.
The Brexit situation was weird, right? Because I was been 18 years old, I think, when that was happening. And it felt like it was like, are you voting for Brexit? Are you voting yes to Brexit? If you're voting yes, you're a racist, and if you vote no, you're not a racist. That's basically from my generation. Then that's what it seemed to be. That's what the peer pressure around it was. If you're voting to leave Brexit, that means you're racist, basically.
So, and especially if you were 18, would that have been the majority of people that had that belief?
If that was what
That's what you. Or if you were 18, then that would, because it's usually the younger people that buy into that.
Yeah, well, we either had, well, from my point of view, we had a lot of people, me included, who I was like, I don't even know what's going on, so I can't vote on this because I don't understand if we should stay or not. So I didn't vote at all for it.
I voted Brexit.
Oh, did you?
But I was like the only person. Me and our mate Mitz were the only two people out of all our like group that voted Brexit. Everyone else was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I couldn't call us racist because I'm Indian, like half Indian.
Yeah, I was going to say you're from an immigrant family. Yeah, you fucking racist. But you know what? Like, you go to one country in the world and try not find Indians. People are like, oh, the Indians are like they're taking over Melbourne. I'm like, mate, they've taken over the whole world. They're everywhere. There's not one country you go to in the world and like you won't find Indians. Like they're everywhere.
I think India is the highest populated country in the world now, right? It's overtaking China.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even believe the Chinese figures at all. I do not believe China's that big. I think it's a lie. So I think India is clearly the biggest. Yeah.
Well, the Chinese one confuses me because of when they brought in the one-child policy, and
it does. It doesn't make.
No, the figures don't make any sense.
It doesn't make no sense at all. And they've got like I had a friend that was just over there last year, and yeah, I think they got like 3,000 of these ghost cities.
Yeah, I've heard about them.
But she said she drove into the countryside, she went in the city, and she said once you leave the city, she goes 4 5-lane highways, no cars, no people, nothing. She said China is empty. It is fucking. She's like, I couldn't believe it. It's empty. The country is empty. Like if like Australia is a massive continent, and even if I drive inland through Australia, you're gonna see other cars, right? And like the East Coast Highway, it's packed. And Australia's only 20 million. I'm like, we're almost the size of China. And she said it's empty. She said the country's empty. There's no one outside the city. So I don't know. It's weird. And the one child policy within 40 years, that's going to halve your population. So how is it going up, right? And plus, they're all immigrating. Yeah, it's weird
because there's loads of Chinese in England because they had like the uni set. Well, the uni were set up with Chinese universities to like swap students. Now I think they've done it with India now, because there's just a massive influx of Indians in the UK. Like massive.
Yeah, there's loads.
What would the there's a shitload of it. Saying like Melbourne's a lot. Like we get most of them come from like Punjab, the Melbourne ones. But
I don't know. I know.
even like Leicester. Leicester's like massive Indian, isn't it?
Yeah, that population's higher, higher ethnicity than there are.
In
English.
Leicester, a lot of the Indians there are like first or second generation. So a lot of them would have come over in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and then had children and had families here. Whereas we're seeing like a big influx of like new immigrant Indians coming in.
That last one was from the Britain-Indian like partnership or whatever, moving out from when they had India. Now there's something else. I don't know what it is, but there's like a different type of Indian, I guess, coming out.
Well, like when India plays in Melbourne, like we used to go watch Australia-India, and like if you go to the MCG, it like you play any other country, it's mostly Aussies in the crowd. When Australia plays India at the MCG, it's like 70% Indian.
Well, my mates go and watch cricket here, and they'll go and watch England India, and they'll say it's just full of Indians. There's no English people.
Oh, there's a pub like kind of local to me, and it's what the football culture's like in England. It's absolutely massive, and it was a big pub for football. And I think it was like after COVID, and then stuff started opening back up again. Like a year after everything opened back up, I went in to go and watch one of the games, and they were like, "Oh, we don't show football anymore. We just show cricket." Like completely stopped showing football every whatever Sunday or whatever it was, just to have the cricket on, because there was more Indian customers going in than there were.
Cricket's not really pub culture. It's not really a pub culture sport, though, is it?
No.
Do you boys like your cricket or not?
Not really. I don't really watch it. I'm just
I've not really watched it either.
Football only, to be fair.
You know what? Like all my English friends, none of them are into cricket. Like I think it's way bigger in Australia than.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Is, yeah. If there's one thing we hear about that's from Australia, it's probably your cricket.
But it's more. It seems it's like very class orientated in England. So like, it's more like the private school kids and stuff play cricket and the public don't. Whereas in Australia, like everyone plays. It's not a class thing at all.
Yeah, and then we got rugby as well, which is
that's a class thing.
Class,
yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
It was a working man sport, and now it's unaffordable for the working man.
Yeah.
Because some of the season tickets are like £1,000 for the year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And the working man who it was built for can't really fork out £1,000 a year to go and watch.
I went and watched Crystal Palace when I was over there, and you have to buy like a freaking membership to go watch one game.
Right? Yeah, you have to buy the yearly membership. You can't just go and buy a ticket.
They still send me emails. I went to a West Ham game, and they're still sending me emails. I'm like, I don't want a fucking membership. Yeah. Anyway.
Right. All right. It's getting a bit late here. Should we wrap this one up?
I was thinking. Yeah. Oh, thanks, boy. It was nice to meet you, bro.
Hey, no, thanks for coming out. It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll leave all of your links and everything in the description of the show notes.
Yeah. If you'd like me to send you anything, just let me know.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll stop.